This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is live, broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We are also live on YouTube right now with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel later. Now today we look at the rise of political intolerance and disruption within the institutions of governance in South Africa. Over the weekend past, nearly 300 people were arrested for drunk driving in Johannesburg alone. We continue our discussion around the devastating effects of alcohol in our society today, but later. We also look at albino mutilation. That's on the rise in Tanzania. And we close with a look at the controversy around the treatment action campaign here in South Africa. But first, let's get the day's news from Anine Domal.
Well, good morning, I'm Anine Domal. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. Botswana University of Technology has allocated an extra 60 million rand for student funding to bring an end to the strike at the institution's campuses countrywide. Students embarked on a violent strike after the university announced it could not help them with funding from government as it has dried up. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme allocated 463 million rand to TUT this year, down from 633 million rand in 2014. The university dug deep into its own pockets to assist just over 5,000 students to continue with their studies.
Those students with outstanding debt should in each case pay a down payment of 1,500 rand plus 1,500 rand as a registration fee. It gives you 3,000 rand. So they have now an acceptance of acknowledgement of debt by saying they will have down payments to cover their debt.
We will have an ongoing engagement. So we're going to have a roadshow where we move from campus to campus, articulating how we got to where we are. This is a university of the people, for the people, by the people. The doors of teaching and learning in TUT are supposed to remain open. They are open and they will continue to be open.
Meanwhile, Wits University's 1 Million 1 Month campaign has gained momentum with the support of struggle stalwarts George Bezos and Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke. Monetary pledges made so far show over 1 million rand is expected to help raise funds for more students in need of financial assistance and to help them gain access to the university. A heavy police presence is expected this morning outside the Bellville Regional Court in Cape Town for the sentencing procedures in the case of 9 Sesekona People's Rights Movement leaders. The 9 appeared briefly in court yesterday. They have been found guilty of contravening the Civil Aviation Act by dumping human waste at the Cape Town International Airport in June 2013 in protest against portable toilets handed out by the City of Cape Town to Khayelitsha residents. An experimental antiviral drug shows some early encouraging signs of effectiveness in its first human test against Ebola in West Africa. The drug, however, only helps if patients get it soon after their symptoms first appear. The level of the Ebola virus in a patient's blood is determined by the amount of time since infection, as well as age and genetics. The current Ebola outbreak is the largest in history. There have been nearly 23,000 cases and nearly 9,000 deaths, mostly in Liberia, Guinea and Sierra Leone. There has still been no claim of responsibility for an attack on a busy market in northeastern Nigeria on Sunday. 5 people died and 46 were seriously wounded after a girl who appeared to be 10 years old blew herself up. The attack bore the hallmarks of Nigeria's homegrown extremist group Boko Haram. In recent months, Boko Haram began using teenage girls and young women for suicide bombings in busy areas. And the West Indies won the toss and elected to bat first in the World Cup Pool B match against Zimbabwe. The West Indies were lucky to have survived a rocky start to their innings. After 241 overs,
And the bowler has to come
After
out the attack.
371 overs for 1, or after 49 overs and 371 for 1, both teams lost their opening match of the tournament, but won their second, and whoever wins the 45th one-day international between the two will move to second spot in the pool behind India.
Taking his jersey off, there's an example of where it was.
It's interesting how difficult back end of the innings is to bowl. Chitara.
Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page and on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you. Government and opposition parties agreed towards the end of last year to work together to restore the dignity of Parliament. That was after chaotic scenes during the sitting after the EFF demanded that President Zuma at that time repay part of the money used to upgrade his Nkandla homestead. But before the ink could dry on the paper that it was written on, members of Parliament misbehaved again in the House during the 2015 State of the Nation address. Disruptions are no longer confined to National Parliament either. Last Friday, the ANC disrupted Helen Zille's State of the Province address in the Western Cape. Yesterday, Gauteng Premier David Makura's State of the Province address was also disrupted several times. Is our democracy under threat from immature leaders? What can be done to restore the dignity and integrity of the institutions of governance in our country? Well, in our Pretoria studio, we have political analyst Dr. Dirk Kotze, who is from the University of South Africa. Very good morning to you, Dr. Kotze. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Dr. Kotze, firstly, tell me, what do you make of the rise of this kind of intolerance and disobedience within the institutions of governance in our country?
Well, there's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is to say that we have now a more assertive opposition, and I think this is what we are starting to see more after the events of August last year, and now with the sauna speech of President Zuma last week, last Thursday in Parliament, and also now in the two provinces. It has become to some extent an indication to what extent the opposition, whether it's the DA or the EFF or the ANC, sees itself as an assertive opposition. So it is not necessarily saying it is disrupting sort of democratic procedure and even decorum within Parliament, but rather to what extent are these institutions working. And I think what we are starting to see is that they are taken more seriously. Even the public is taking Parliament more seriously, but especially the governing parties.
I would dispute that with you, sir. There's a big chunk of the South African society on social media forums who's talking about losing faith in the institutions of Parliament. What do you say to that?
Well, that has been the case before these incidents. The level of credibility and of integrity of these institutions, as well as political parties, as well as politicians, were very low. Compared to other institutions like the judiciary, for example, in South Africa, or even religious organizations. They are the ones with the high integrity, the high credibility. So these incidents haven't really changed that. The social media is a very small portion of South African society. We saw it last year. So I think it will not be correct to use the social media as an indicator of what's the general view or the public opinion in South Africa. The social media represents just over 1 million or more of the 252 million in South Africa.
Democracy demands the highest values, responsibility and accountability. How do we uphold and restore the dignity and integrity of institutions of governance then?
Well, I think you are making one assumption which is not necessarily correct, and that is to say dignity is equal to accountability, and that is obviously not correct. Accountability, I think, would say in this respect is more important than dignity. We see what is happening in many parliaments all over the world, including the British Parliament, where there are sometimes scenes that are much worse than what we have experienced in South Africa. No one is claiming that democracy is under threat in the UK, or we have seen it also in Turkey 10 days ago, where even more vicious scenes of competition and fighting actually amongst the different members of Parliament Japan is another example where it has happened, where there's actually fist fights. So I don't think we must over-interpret the situation in South Africa. We are at a point where there's a new way of or a new relationship emerging between the governing parties, whether they are the DA in the Western Cape or the ANC in the National Parliament or other provincial parliaments, and opposition parties. And I think what in the past was lacking is that the executives were always too strong, while the legislatures, parliaments were not strong enough, sometimes merely regarded as rubber stamps. And what we are now seeing is that opposition parties are saying, but we have reached the point of so much frustration that we have to do something about it. I'm not saying that all these actions are under all conditions justifiable, but it is not merely a saying of restoring order and decorum and dignity for the sake of it.
I have to raise a point of order there, Dr. Kotze. I want to ask you about our politicians. Do you think they can differentiate between the accountability that you're talking about and chaos and anarchy within the institution?
Yes, I think so. I think what we've seen with the SONA speech on the one hand, and thereafter the debates on the SONA speech the next week, were very different. There was a much more subdued atmosphere there. It was much more focused. If we think about, for example, the speech on the one hand of Minister Nathi Mthethwa that focused on his portfolio of arts and culture, and then the speeches by both Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu, President Zuma actually congratulated them in his response last Friday, that they, in his words, made quite a constructive contribution to the debate.
Are you happy with our politicians and our members of parliament in both the local and national houses? They understand the rules of parliament. Shouldn't we think about some form of political school before you enter into the house?
Well, I think there are many. Maybe those new members are not fully yet appreciative of the different traditions within parliament. But as I tried to indicate, we should not try to impose a status quo, a sort of almost a conservatism in the procedures of Parliament. Parliament is a boiling pot. It's a place. It's the only place really where political parties come together on a very regular basis. So one has to expect that very often the temperature will be very high, that there will be lots of energy, there will be lots of contestation. If that is not the case, I think we should actually be very concerned about the situation.
Dr. Dirk Kotze, I thank you very much for joining us today, giving us your informed views from the University of South Africa. That is political analyst Dr. Dirk Kotze, giving his views on disruption within the various legislatures and the National House that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Of course, yesterday, the Gauteng Premier, he also announced that the Gauteng province will be investing billions on revitalizing the township economies and infrastructure.
Township enterprises.
Reconfiguring the province, Gauteng municipalities will have to come up with ideas for improving the province economy. Premier David Makhura stressed the need to reverse inequality.
Over the next 5 years, we will mobilize more than 10 billion rands in public and private sector investments in the regeneration of the CBD of Johannesburg as the seat of our own provincial government.
But look, Madam Speaker, the Premier here is very lying to our people here. He failed to tell the people of Gauteng 500 million they're going to raise from Tshwane by selling the municipal land, and it's already gazetted. Premier, you must tell the Gauteng people the truth.
Billions are to be pumped into reviving township economies.
Over the next 3 years, we'll inject 3 billion rands under the rubric of Josie at Work to support the township enterprises across the city. The city of Tshwane has already started an initiative of putting 22 million rands to support the township economy, and we are confident that this amount is going to grow substantially when the city finalizes its strategy on the township economy. Ekurhuleni Metro has made available 150 million rands to support township enterprises and township entrepreneurs in the city.
Serious attention will also be given to energy security and to the network infrastructure. There was mixed reaction to the Premier's address.
We have evidence that they've presented nothing but lies, because last year the Premier presented another string of empty promises that were very unrealistic in terms of achievement.
There's no nuts and bolts as to how he's going to tackle local government and the corruption that's happening there and the actual service delivery that should happen at local government level.
What worries us is the fact that there were plans that were announced in the state of the province last year. Instead of accounting them and telling the province on how to move forward, the Premier is also announcing new plans.
Good to see you.
Lehana Tsuteti, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Of course, a little bit later this morning at about 10 o'clock, we'll be in the Free State, where the State of the Province address will be delivered there this morning. Should be another interesting session there. There you have live incoming pictures from the province of Bloemfontein. State of the Province will be there. Well, we'll be live there at 10 o'clock this morning to see, what the province will be looking at for the next financial year. Let's take a look at your tweets. What are you saying about the state of the provinces? At SABC Newsroom, of course, is where you can interact with us. Ko says, David Makura State of the Province address sounds good in theory, but it's really just that. Too good to be true. Hashtag SopaGP. Mborofeta Temba says, would be great to have those saying SopaGP was disappointing clearly articulate their positions. We can't just be negative. Very good statement there. Lonwabo says, the one minor party of open letters that decided to disrupt SopaGP, showing it has no value to add except violence, says Lonwabo. The best is yet to come. Tato Machalo says, Makura is one of my or the respected premiers. I just like the guy. He sounds sincere and humble. That one from Tato Machale. Well, those are some of your views. Keep it coming. We love interacting with you. We love to see what you're thinking. Let's now take a look at the front pages from elsewhere. Let's go around the world. You'll see the 87th Academy Award winners are making headlines around the world today. The Times in the United Kingdom has a very proud Eddie Redmayne on the front page holding his Oscar after being named Best Actor for his role as Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything. In the United States, the Los Angeles Times looking at the film that got the film industry's highest recognition at the Oscars, Birdman. There, director Alejandro Inarritu holds up the Oscar. And closer to home here on the continent in Nigeria, the Vanguard is reporting former British Prime Minister Tony Blair confirmed that he held a private meeting with the candidate of the All Progressives Congress in London on Saturday. It's been reported that Buhari, the former head of state, was in the United Kingdom on a working visit. Now for today's picture of the day. It comes from Christoph Adelbert. It says, hashtag EFF and ANC members clash outside the Gauteng provincial legislature during SONA GP. Of course, the State of the Province address. It is. That one went down in Johannesburg yesterday. Now let's have a look at what's happening across the country today. In Johannesburg, Professor Henny Stradom will brief the media on a conference on Boko Haram and international law at around 11 a.m. this morning. Then in Cape Town, the Justice Alliance of South Africa will take several government departments to court to stop the closure of 4 childcare centres in the Western Cape. There we stay in the mother city. The debate on Premier Helen Zille's State of the Province address gets underway at 2 p.m. this afternoon. And in Parliament, DA Parliamentary Leader Musi Maimane and others will present the party's alternative budget for 2015-16 at 11 a.m. this morning. Time for us to take a short break. You're watching Newsroom right here on SABC News.
food for thought in the words of Ray Davis. Remember, a challenge only becomes an obstacle when you bow to it.
Of dedication and perseverance, Abayani Maitakore made history as one of South Africa's best performing matriculants of 2014, attaining 7 distinctions.
I believe that nothing should stand in your way if you see yourself in the future doing something great. So I just carried on and I never gave up. Though the circumstances I faced were challenging, I love challenges, so I was like, yeah man, bring it on, I can do it.
Join me, Rifiwe Muiba, on Bophelong, your show about those who take on and conquer life's challenges, every Saturday at 17:30.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. There's been growing calls from political organizations to deregister the Treatment Action Campaign. The call comes after the TAC has been openly campaigning for the dismissal of the Free State Health MEC Benny Malakwane following numerous problems with health service delivery, as well as the arrest of 117 community health workers there. A move which was condemned by Doctors Without Borders and Rural Health Advocacy. In a joint statement, both organizations have come out in support of the TAC, saying the call is itself self-destructive and short-sighted. Now today, we are joined by Anele Iyawa, who is the General Secretary of the TAC. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you and the viewers.
What is the latest? What's happening?
What is happening? In fact, what is happening in Free State is I don't know how can I describe it. But all what we know is that as TAC, we are not fighting Benny Malakwane as the person, but we are fighting against the system, the health system that continues to compromise the poorest of the poor on the ground. And it happened that MEC Benny Malakwane to be the one who is in the helm of that particular department. So as TAC, we are not backing off from our campaign to fix the Free State public health system. We are not backing off from our campaign to call for MEC Dr. Benny Malakwane to be removed. However, those who were having a march against TAC, it is evident that it was just a clique of individuals who are in the payroll of certain political leaders within Free State, because as TAC we have consulted at length with many national organizations who distanced themselves from what was happening in Free State.
What is happening in the Free State? What are the claims that you are making?
Come again?
What are the claims that you are making that is happening in the Free State?
As TAC, we are not making any claims, but all what we are saying, we are telling a story, a bad story of what is happening on the ground. On the ground in Free State, many doctors, many nurses are leaving the service. Many health users are not getting adequate health services within the health facilities in Free State. So that is the problem. Many people in Free State, when they go to health facilities to access medicines, they don't get them. They are being turned away because on the shelves there is no medication for them. So there are no claims that we are making, but we are only representing the voice of those who are unable to speak for themselves.
Now, there have been calls for the deregistration of your organization. We also know that the TAC has had some difficult times in the recent past. What do you make of these deregistration calls, and then where are you as an organization, the TAC?
As TAC, as TAC, we never allowed a situation whereby we stoop low and embark on cheap politics. TAC is an international organization, so we embark on serious campaigns that seek to address the needs of the people. So what happened in Free State last week, it was just a group of people who wanted a popularity in the name of TAC. Hence is why the majority of civil society organizations in South Africa, including SANAC leadership, including NAPWA leadership, national, and many other organizations, they have condemned what was happening in Free State. So there is nothing that is going to scare us from that. But however, as TAC, we are calling on the ANC Youth League leadership in the Free State to come on board we sit around the table. We are still waiting for a response from them, whereby we are going to sit around the table. They bring their issues on the table. We bring what is happening on the table. And we see from there as to say, how do we move forward?
There's serious claims being made against the TAC from various quarters within that. You can go to the watch. From various quarters. The one is that you're advancing the financial interests of big pharmaceutical companies. The other one is that you are an organization that is fronting as a political entity. What do you say to those allegations?
One, as TAC, we have been transparent and we will continue to be transparent. When we had our global crowdfunding campaign, there were two pharmaceutical companies that are based in South Africa who came forward to say, TAC, here is the money that we can give you. But in principle, TAC cannot take money from pharmaceutical companies. You can go to the TAC website, you can go on our finances. Pfizer and Aspen came trying to donate something from us, we rejected that. In terms of being agents of other political parties, TAC is not aligned to any political party. However, health issues, they need political intervention because they are constitutional matters. So that's why as TAC, we continue to engage on political matters, but also, if you look at TAC membership, the majority of the TAC membership are ANC voters and ANC supporters. And one becomes very frustrated and disappointed when the same ANC is pushing away some of its supporters who are members of TAC. So TAC, we are not aligned to any political party.
In conclusion, let's talk about the financials. Last year was a very difficult year for the TAC financially. Yes. Where are you this year, and what is the outlook like?
At the present moment, as I've said last year, that 2015-2016 financial year of TAC, we are getting there, even though we have not yet reached that mark, but we have managed to reach 60% of the funding, which gives us a guarantee that we will continue as an organization. However, we have not stopped. We are busy with our fundraising campaign moving forward because we strongly believe that without any funding, there is no way that we can go forward. That's why it becomes a responsibility of TAC leadership to make sure that our coffers don't get dry.
I thank you for joining us today.
Thanks to you, my brother.
That's the General Secretary of the Treatment Action Campaign here in South Africa, Mr. Anele Yawa. Thank you once again.
Thanks, sir.
We move on now. Not only do people with albinism face prejudice, but also now death in Tanzania. Recently, an 18-month-old toddler was snatched from her mother there. The little one was found dead with all his limbs hacked off not far from his parental home, while another albino toddler remains missing after being kidnapped in December last year. So far, at least 74 children have been reportedly killed. Witch doctors in Tanzania believe that albino body parts brings wealth and have magical powers. The Tanzanian government has announced that a total ban of witch doctors over the continued albino killings. Now, for more detail, we are joined on the line by Dr. Ali Posi, who is the advocate and a lecturer at the Zanzibar University in Tanzania. Very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Can you give us the latest developments with regards to the stories of these killings, the albino killings in your country?
Well, let me start by giving an overview of the whole, what I can call systemic mutilation of people with albinism in Tanzania. It all started to be known or to be aired by media around 2008. And the killings took place, and different organizations, NGOs, and civil society, different human rights advocates were complaining about the killing. However, little action has been taken. Few cases have been taken to court. And the worst thing is, even family members are believed to be involved in those killings. Perhaps it might be the cause of difficulties in taking matters to the court and so forth. And to me, I would say it's a bigger thing. It's not only about education or not. It's something relating to the cultural aspect. It's something that is connected with belief. So when we try to solve these things, it's not about only having a legal solution within it. It's something that is connected with cultural aspects. So it is believed about more than 70 people are reported to have been attacked. Half of or 1/3 of them being murdered, and the remaining being left with permanent disability. And well, I would say the government's action up to now is not encouraging, or it's not something that one can say it's doing enough to protect people with albinism in Tanzania. That's a general reflection that I can say for now.
I want to ask you, Islam and Christianity remain the main religions in Tanzania. 2010 survey, though, found that more than 90% of people still believe in witchcraft in your country. What impact has the announcement of the banning of witchcraft activities now had on the Tanzanian people?
Well, as I've said, it's difficult because, first of all, Tanzania is mostly two biggest religions, Muslims and Christians. However, you will find even those people who tend to be good believers of their respective religion still believe in witchcraft. As I would say, for example, it is believed, or it is said that most people who are involved in these killings are either businessmen, politicians, or anyone who is having ambitions of being rich or successful in life. So, well, in simple answer of your question as to whether the banning has impact or not, I'll say that it has really little impact. Why? Because people still believe in those things, witchcraft, that is. Secondly, even if they are connected with one or another religion, the fact that they still believe in witchcraft, it still remains difficult to tackle. So it needs sensitization from the scratch. When a child is born, maybe we should include in our school syllabus what is disability, not only albinism, different kind of disability, because this stereotyping is not only on people with albinism, there are other types, maybe elderly women with red eyes. Maybe something else can pop up in the future. Who knows? So we need to change. We need to change, and maybe not only in Africa, not only in Tanzania. That is, these things happen maybe in other countries in Africa. It's just that they are not reported.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. That's Dr. Ali Posi, who's an advocate and lecturer at Zanzibar University in Tanzania. We're talking about albino killings. We've seen a whole host of those in Tanzania linked directly to witchcraft activities in that country. Here are some of your views, or some of the views of those that are talking about that on Twitter. Lovelet Luaktakare says, UNICEF, please come to Tanzania and protect children with albinism. Albino killings is massive in Tanzania. Government is not serious enough to. Imran says, so somewhere in the world, albinos are being killed to trade their organs. What happened to humanity? Asks Imran. Mugaka says, dear Police Tanzania, any intelligence update from the DCI on albino killings? Why is he so silent? Is the question. Agreoriwa says, albino killings in Tanzania equals to election year. Can somebody disapprove this hypothesis? Shocking, Africa, says Agreoriwo. Everest Chahali says, albino killings in Tanzania is more an issue of humanity rather than legislation. Laws are already there, but they simply are not working. Those are some of the views with regards to albino killings. We'll try and keep an eye on that story as it develops throughout this year. Now for time for the tweet of the day. It comes from Next Big Thing. And it says, a nation that neglects education neglects its future. That's at David Makura, of course, State of the Province address. That one from Next Big Thing. That's our tweet of the day. Now let's take a look at what's happening on Newsroom's Facebook page. There you'll see the Constitutional Court on Monday dismissed an application by Agang SA for a secret ballot on a motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma. The party said also 60 million rand agreement between the Tshwane University of Technology management and the Student Representative Council has been concluded, bringing an end to the violent strike on that campus. And you will see that a Japanese anti-Ebola drug being tested in Guinea should be made available across West Africa after initial trials showed it halved mortality rates in some patients. The medical charity administering it said you can find all of those stories, of course, and a whole lot more on Newsroom's Facebook page. You can also visit our website. It's sabc.co.za/news. That's where you'll find all the latest breaking news updates from all around the world. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with you after a short little break.
Is a personal expression that evokes a flame from within.
Street art, it's a vast concept.
Dancing is one of the main art forms on the streets of Africa. Regardless of how it is done, the streets remain expressive. A passionate artist in the central business district of Johannesburg.
Yeah, I've been doing this it's been 7 years or 8 years now.
Brains lost control on what to do then. Words dispute in the mouth of a woman.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. The Tshwane University of Technology has allocated an extra 60 million rand for student funding to bring an end to the strike at the institution's campuses countrywide. Students embarked on a violent strike last month after the university announced it could not help them with funding from government as it had dried up. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme allocated 463 million rand to TUT this year, down from 633 million rand in 2014. The university dug deep into its own pockets to assist just over 5,000 students to continue with their studies. A heavy police presence is expected this morning outside the Bellville Regional Court in Cape Town for the sentencing procedures in the case of 9 Ses'khona People Rights Movement leaders. The 9 appeared briefly in court yesterday. They have been found guilty of contravening the Civil Aviation Act by dumping human waste at the Cape Town International Airport in June 2013 in protest against portable toilets handed out by the City of Cape Town to Khayelitsha residents. An experimental antiviral drug shows some early encouraging signs of effectiveness in its first human test against Ebola in West Africa. The drug, however, only helps if patients get it soon after their symptoms first appear. The level of the Ebola virus in a patient's blood is determined by the amount of time since infection, as well as age and genetics. The current Ebola outbreak is the largest in history. There have been nearly 23,000 cases and nearly 9,000 deaths, mostly in Liberia, Guinea and Sierra Leone. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Yevon, back to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Now, drunk driving is one of the biggest threats to road safety in South Africa. Over the weekend alone, 261 people were arrested by Johannesburg Metro Police for driving drunk in the city. South Africa has a challenging ever-rising death toll on our roads. Horrific pictures of accidents on our roads and various campaigns have so far not been able to reduce the carnage. More than 1,350 people died on the roads over the 2014-15 festive season alone, and alcohol abuse is being said to be a major contributor. Now, South Africans Against Drink Driving, SADD, launched an alco-free February campaign that coincided with legislation that is being mounted in South Africa of zero alcohol tolerance for drivers on the road. Now, the founder and director of South Africans Against Drink Driving, Cara Smith, is with us this morning, and then the chairperson of the Justice Project South Africa, Howard Dembowski, joins us to talk about zero alcohol tolerance for drivers. Very good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Can I start with you? Zero, you say drinking and driving is not an accident at all, and you want zero tolerance for any drinking on the roads.
Yes, we certainly do. We feel people should drive if they're absolutely sober. They should have zero alcohol in their body. But we really accept the fact that a blood alcohol level of zero is very hard, and we wish that we could stick to the 0.05 that we've got at the moment, which actually is best practice. But unfortunately, it's not being enforced. So I think the only thing that will work in South Africa is zero, because people don't seem to understand what a drink is, what a unit is, and what it comes to. People say, I drank 6 quarts of light alcohol, beer, and I'll be under the limit because it's low alcohol. So I think in South Africa, I think we've got a very unsophisticated audience. So zero is the thing that really will make sense to them.
How do you view that, Howard?
Well, I think we need to be actually dead honest with one another here, and we need to say that we could actually take our government gazette and say that the alcohol limit is going to be minus 10,000 for all that's actually happening at the moment. In the 3 years, 2011 to 2014, 10,000 people were arrested by the JMPD, the TMPD, Gauteng Department of Community Safety, and the RTMC for driving under the influence of alcohol. In those 3 years, not one single conviction took place. And that is the big problem that we have. We, as Justice Project South Africa, would definitely support a lowering of the current limit and the institution of a zero alcohol tolerance policy. However, on a basis that if you have a small amount of alcohol in your bloodstream, you would be subject to an administrative fine, and only from 0.02 upwards would you be convicted of a criminal offence. However, and this is the big however, if we're not going to get enforcement right, if we're not going to get our trials right, if we're not going to get our evidence right, etc., we may as well not even bother.
We live in a country that is ranked the 4th biggest binge drinkers in the world, the biggest drinkers on the African continent. This kind of policing has proven to not work. Shouldn't we align it with other programs within the wider populace and within the wider conversation that we have around alcohol, instead of trying to police people once it's too late?
You know, so basically you're saying, should there be more education? Should there be more? The education by itself does not work. The only thing that really works is enforcement. So the education programs have been going. I agree they haven't been done correctly enough. But I agree completely with Howard. The only thing that really works is the enforcement. So we have to have the enforcement. We have to have the correct paperwork done so that when the offenders go to court, it stands up in court, that they then are prosecuted correctly, that licenses are suspended as is allowed, that they're given the correct fines, and that if they kill or injure, they automatically go to jail. So those are the things that really work. Education comes behind that, and it's a very small part. But the main thing that needs to be done is the tightening up between the police, the traffic officers, Department of Transport, and Department of Justice, and mainly Department of Justice.
Enforcement works, Howard. Is that your view as well, that enforcement works? And my question is, Shouldn't we be thinking about how do we get South Africans to drink less in general?
Eben, we should be thinking about that, but that's a competency of the Department of Health, to be very honest with you. The Department of Transport, our law enforcement authorities and our courts have a responsibility to police laws. Let's not confuse things and start conflating whose responsibility is what. We do need to reduce alcohol consumption in South Africa. And in fact, if you have a look at the NIMS studies where post-mortems were conducted on people who were killed in road traffic crashes, 57% of those people were over the current limit of 0.05 by 3 times or more. People don't just drive with a little bit of booze in their system. They get hammered and then they drive. And that is a big problem. But if you have a look at successful campaigns everywhere else in the world, particularly, we love comparing ourselves to Australia. We've done this a number of times on the show. Okay? In Australia, don't even think about it. It's very, very simple because they enforce it brutally, and they deal with it immediately. In South Africa, the State versus Hendricks case overturned the use of evidentiary breath testing equipment. As a result, it has stalled prosecutions in South Africa to the extent that we get nowhere. Why? Because our state pathology labs cannot turn out blood test results within a reasonable time frame. And that is the big problem. We need to get evidential breath testing back in, and we need to employ best practices which actually say it's not the harshness of the sentence, it's not how many people are convicted, it's how immediately they are actually dealt with that makes a big difference to prosecuting these cases.
Following through on the arrest, you say, is what we need to do in the short term in South Africa. Now, ma'am, Easter is just around the corner. What would you like to see happen in the run-up, not just Easter weekend when we see the roadblocks, but in the run-up to these kinds of peak periods that we have in South Africa?
Easter is not really a peak period. It's every single day people die. And in fact, Easter and Christmas are slightly safe on the road because they're more visible policing. So we would like this to be a 365-day occurrence, that the testing is done every single day. It's done in the morning, it's done in the afternoon, it's done at night. Every single time someone is stopped for speeding, they must be breathalyzed. Every time someone is stopped to check the tires, they must be breathalyzed. So we need people to know that they cannot get away with drinking and driving, that they've tested. Because in South Africa at the moment, people know the chance of them getting away with it are very good. I mean, I've driven for over 40 years. I've never been tested once. Why not? I'm a little white old lady. A little white old lady killed my child, and that's why I started sad. Just test people, and then as Howard says, we need special drink driving courts so that the people appear in court the next day and the sentencing is very fast. Licenses are suspended, or otherwise they have alcohol ignition interlocks installed in the vehicles.
Final remarks, Howard.
You cannot use a sledgehammer to kill an ant. It's not a good idea ever. What we need to do is we need to get the basics right. We need to get the message out to people there that if you drink and drive, you might not care about anybody else, but you could kill yourself. So you know what? At least have a sense of self-preservation.
Yeah. I think quite often that's the furthest concern people have when they have a drink. But the thing is that we've socialized ourselves in South Africa for this to be quite acceptable practice, and maybe the harsh follow-through is the way to look at this. I thank you, Cara Smith and Howard Dembowski, for joining us today to talk about the scourge. That is drink driving, and drinking in general is a problem we have in South Africa. We drink the most on the African continent, 4th most in the world when it comes to binge drinking, which is also the most destructive to families, most destructive to our children. Finally, as our guest said, most destructive to ourselves. Here are some of your views. At SABC Newsroom is where they've been coming through. End drunk driving says, alcohol justice, DWI drunk driving, slap on the wrist, they'll do it again. Put them in the pen, they'll think again. Yes, that kind of makes sense. That's where we're at. Crack down. Uptown Skotani says, if they trace alcohol in your blood, you're going to be locked up. Hashtag zero alcohol. Zero alcohol, not even one beer. How do I report a drunk driver? That is a good question, D. Fizzy. How do you do that, Howard? Tell us quickly.
phone 10-111 because they're going to react. Otherwise, you can phone the RTMC's National Call Centre, 0861 400 800, and you can report those people.
Thank you very much. Well, that is where we wrap it. Just a quick update on the cricket. The latest is that Chris Gayle has scored a massive 215 runs as the West Indies, amassed 372 runs for the loss of 2 wickets against Zimbabwe in their Group World Cup match. Of course, South Africa play West Indies on Friday, and that prognosis is not what we wanted to hear. Anyhow, Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We're also live on YouTube right now with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.